Good morning everyone. Tara, basa na tayo ng ating history guys. Kapwa ka Filipino, magbasa tayo. History of the Filipino People by Agoncillo and Guerrero. Today is 3 February 2023. Yung note natin dyan nakalagay back to original reading, 5th edition. Kasi guys, may naisingit lang ako dyan na 8th edition yung 15, yung topic 15, pero the rest is 5th edition talaga yan. History of the Filipino People, Part 4, the American Period. Topic number 18, the word administration. Nandito na tayo sa paragraph. The Veto Question. Nilalagay ko yung sip saan pa ako mapunta sa heater eh. The Veto Question. Another source of controversy between Wood and the Filipino leaders was his alleged violation of the spirit of the Jones Law through unrestricted use of the veto power. During the first 5 years of his administration, Wood vetoed no less than 124 bills and during the first 5 years of his administration, Wood vetoed no less than 124 bills out of 411 submitted to him for approval. Harrison earlier used the veto power sparingly, and when he did, none of the 5 bills he vetoed were of first-rate importance. Wood explained that he vetoed those bills that were unconstitutional, defective in form, appropriated more money than was allowed by a sound fiscal policy, or in his opinion, were unwise. In many instances, he complained the bills were sent to him just before the session of the legislature adjourned, when he had no choice except either to approve or disapprove without much deliberation. Quezon, in his fight with Wood, harassed the latter by having the legislature purposely pass defective laws, knowing that Wood would veto them. Then he attacked Wood as uncooperative and anti-Filipino. In 1924, in appealing against the Governor-General's unrestricted use of the veto power, a memorandum presented to President College declared that the Governor-General had no power to disapprove a measure which does not run counter to any provisions of the Organic Act and is of mere domestic concern. College, however, supported Wood's position and asserted that the veto power was not in any way limited to a particular class of bills. Though Wood had the questioning support of Washington, the controversy between him and the political leaders continued unabated. It came to an end only when Wood died while being operated on for brain tumor on August 27, 1927. Wood's achievements. Despite frequent setbacks, Wood accomplished great constructive work. He rehabilitated the Philippine National Bank, put the government on its feet financially, and revived the educational, sanitary, and public works system that suffered retrogression under Harrison. An able military man, he was the only one among high American and Filipino officials to call attention to the necessity of establishing an adequate defense system for the Philippines if the Philippines were to be really prepared for self-government and independence. The administration of Henry L. Stimson, 1928 to 1929. Wood's successors reverted to a certain extent to the Harrison regime in that they effected a system of cooperation between the legislature and the executive branch, under which the Filipino political leaders had a certain influence over administration. As a result, harmony was restored to the government. This meant were Henry L. Stimson (1928 to 1929), Dwight F. Davis (1929 to 1932), Theodore Roosevelt Jr. (1932 to 1933), and Frank Murphy (1933–1935). When Governor Wood died, President Coolidge appointed Henry L. Stimson as his successor. Governor Stimson arrived in March 1928 and remained about a year. His policy was to bring about a program of economic development and, without committing himself to independence, to re-establish the cordial relations between the office of the executive and the Philippine legislature. Stimson's policy may be said to be a compromise between those of his two immediate predecessors. He was less plastic in the hands of the politicians than Harrison, but at the same time more tractable than General Wood. As a result, Stimson won over the Filipino leaders, particularly Quezon, who could have been his worst enemy. In agreement with the Filipino leaders, Stimson followed a four-point program to bring about regular and responsible cooperation between the executive and legislative branches of the government. The first was the passage of the Bill of Bill, which appropriated 250,000 pesos annually to enable the Governor-General to secure the services of advisors and technical assistants. 10 members of the cabinet were chosen from the Nacionalista Party, and only after consultations with the leaders of the party Thirdly, the rules of procedure of both houses of the legislature were amended to give members of the cabinet the privilege of Thirdly, the rules of procedure of both houses of the legislature were amended to give members of the cabinet the privilege of debate on the floor of the legislature. Finally, Stimson restored the Council of State. The council's membership was expanded to include the majority floor leaders of both houses of the legislature. The council, however, was stripped of its former powers and was reduced to a mere advisory body designed to give opportunity for friendly contact, consultation, and cooperation between the Governor-General and the legislative leaders. After a little more than a year, Stimson resigned and returned to the United States to become Secretary of State in President Herbert Hoover's cabinet. His successors, impressed with the success of his program, continued his policy. The Independence Missions. The promise of independence in the preamble of the Jones Law gave impetus to the independence campaign. The Filipinos, however, deferred agitating for independence until after the end of World War I. The Filipino leaders felt it would be embarrassing to press the independence problem on the United States, who at the time was embroiled in the war in Europe. Moreover, the international situation resulting from the war was hardly auspicious for the launching of a weak and new nation. Upon the termination of the war, the Filipinos again raised the problem of independence. They were particularly encouraged by the popularity of the doctrine of self-determination, and one of the principles President Wilson enunciated to guide the peace settlement in 1919. On November 7, 1918, the Philippine legislature created a Commission of Independence for the purpose of studying all matters relating to the negotiation and organizing of the independence of the Philippines early in 1919. The first independence mission, headed by Quezon, went to the United States. Secretary of War Newton Baker, in behalf of President Wilson, who was in Europe at the time, told the mission that he felt it was the prevailing feeling in the United States that the days were very close at hand when the Philippines could be allowed to sever the mere political tie remaining and become an independent nation. Hayden read President Wilson's message, which assured the missioners that independence was an end almost in sight. Early in June 19, the mission made a vigorous plea for independence before a joint Senate-House Committee on Philippine Affairs. The mission assured that body that the conditions laid down by the Jones Law as prerequisite for the grant of independence had been met by the people. On July 20, 1919, hopes for early independence proved futile when the Republican leaders in Congress decided to postpone indefinitely the question of Philippine independence. Part of the mission remained behind to carry out a publicity campaign in the United States in favor of early independence. The Philippine Press Bureau was created in Washington under the supervision of the Resident Commissioner. This office published the Philippine Press Bulletin and circulated the monthly paper as well as other literature in behalf of Philippine independence to members of Congress, prominent citizens, and more than 4,500 newspapers all over the United States. In Manila, an executive office on independence was established under Teodoro M. Calao. Calao's office produced articles, books, publications, and propaganda materials for dissemination to persons and organizations sympathetic to the cause of the Filipino people. The funds for the independence mission of 1919 had been provided by the Appropriation Law of 1919, apprehensive that in case a Republican governor who might succeed Harrison would do away with the item that provided funds for the mission. Some prominent members of the legislature recommended the passage of a separate law making a permanent appropriation of 1 million pesos for the purpose. Some legislators, on the other hand, notably Senator Claro M. Recto, opposed the measure on the ground that $500,000 pesos was enough for the work of the mission and that the extra funds could be used for other projects which would prove the Filipinos' ability for self-government, such as public works and the building of more schools. Besides, the bill was unnecessary because independence would never be achieved if the United States were against it, even if millions were spent to influence the American Congress. In spite of these objections, however, the House approved the Independence Fund Bill by an overwhelming vote on October 29, 1920. The amount included in the budgets of the Senate and the House at the rate of 500,000 pesos for each chamber was automatically appropriated each year. The bill thus obviated the possibility of a veto by a succeeding Governor-General who might not be as sympathetic as Harrison to the independence movement. The law further provided that expenses made under it were exempted from the pre-auditing process usually required of other appropriations. The signature of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the President and House of Representatives, and the President of the Senate would suffice to authorize payments from the fund. On February 15, 1924, however, Insular Auditor Ben F. Wright questioned the constitutionality of the law and ordered the suspension of payments from the fund. He argued that the use of public funds was illegal, especially because the standing annual appropriation was not necessary for the support of the legislature. The auditor's ruling for a while dissolved partisan differences, and a collection committee was organized to raise independence funds by popular subscription. More independence missions were sent to the United States to agitate either for more political autonomy or for the grant of independence. In 1921, Quezon headed a mission to protest the recommendations of the Woodford-based mission. Late in 1923, at the height of the cabinet crisis, Speaker Rojas headed another mission to the United States to determine once and for all the exact status of the Philippines. The Philippine legislature, through the mission, requested in two resolutions the recall of Wood and the installation of a Filipino Governor-General. On January 8, 1924, a memorial signed by Rojas Resident Commissioners Pedro Guevara and Isauro Gabaldon was presented to President Coolidge. The resolution expressed the Filipino leaders' conviction that In view of both controversies, within independence would be the only solution to the Philippine problem. Coletes, in his reply to the mission, shattered the hopes of the Filipinos for independence. He pointed out that a considerable section of the Filipino people is of the opinion that at this time any change which would weaken the tie between the Filipinos and the American nation would be a misfortune to the islands. Coletes added that it would be inauspicious to launch an independent nation when the world was in a state of high tension and unsettlement. He reminded the mission that the Filipino people are by no means equipped, either in wealth or experience, to undertake the heavy burden which would be imposed upon them with political independence. Their position in the world is such that without American protection, there would be the unrestricted temptation to maintain an extensive and costly military and naval service. It is to be doubted whether, with utmost exertion, the most complete solidarity among themselves, the most unqualified and devoted patriotism, it would be possible of the people of the islands to maintain an independent place in the world for an indefinite future. Coletes assured the missioners that if the Filipinos were already prepared, the American government and people would gladly accord independence. Congressional sentiment, however, was favorable to granting independence to the Philippines. Both the House and Senate committees on insular affairs received during the months of February and March 1924 a number of bills and resolutions providing for Philippine independence. The most acceptable of this was the resolution introduced by Representative Henry Allen Cooper on January 9, 1924, which provided for the creation of a constitutional convention for the purpose of framing a constitution for an independent Philippine Republican government. In the Senate, the majority sentiment was in favor of independence. Opinion was divided only on the date of American withdrawal from the Philippines. When the House Committee on Insular Affairs approved the Cooper resolution, the administration, through the Chief of the Bureau of Insular Affairs, Frank McIntyre, sent an urgent message to Governor Wood requesting him to make a statement that Secretary of War John Wilkes could use his influence to stem the tide of independence legislation. Governor Wood, in a cable dated March 17, declared that while he sympathized with the aspirations of the Filipinos for independence, he was fully aware that they were not really prepared to assume its responsibility. Independence would only be inimical on their interest. American legislators, Wood cautioned, should not be swept off their feet by purely local and artificial agitations produced by a small group of politicians. The Commission on Independence, tapusin ko lang tong paragraph na to, guys. Sobrang haba. The Commission of Independence, the political parties which momentarily forgot their differences, and the metropolitan newspapers bitterly denounced Wood for his letter. Wood's cablegram, however, had very little effect on a Congress bent on giving the Philippines independence at any cost. By way of compromise, the administration decided to support a bill which would grant the Philippines complete autonomy under an elected Filipino governor-general. An American resident commissioner would represent the United States during the 30-year transition period provided by the bill. This was the Fairfield Bill, the administration's substitute for the Cooper Bill. Early in 1924, Quezon Osmeña and Claro M. Rector joined the Rojas Mission in Washington. The mission thought that the Fairfield Bill was the best that could be obtained at the time they were working for its enactment into law. Despite Quezon's attempts to make the bill acceptable to the Filipino leaders at home, however, there was much unfavorable sentiment against the bill due to the following reasons. The transition period before independence was too long. The tariff relations between the United States and the Philippines would only make economic independence impossible, and the provision that English would remain as the medium of instruction in the schools and colleges was objectionable. This factor, as well as the lack of time for both houses of the American Congress to consider the bill, dashed the hopes of the missioners that they could bring home an independence act. In 1926, Osmeña headed another independence mission, which was a failure because the United States was no longer favorably disposed to settle the Philippine problem. The climate of opinion had by then changed in Capitol Hill. Instead of granting concession to the Philippines, the American Congress did set or reducing Philippine autonomy by considering reactionary bills unfavorable to the Philippines. Representative Kiss introduced two bills, one of which was designed to increase the powers of the insular auditor, while the other empowered the Governor-General to control and dispose the revenue collected from duties on Philippine products exported to the United States. Just before the Congress adjourned, Representative Bacon introduced his most opposed bill, which provided for the permanent separation of Mindanao, Sulu and Palawan from the rest of the Philippines, and providing for a special form of government for these areas. The Pure Independence Bill submitted to Congress were not even reported monthly, debated upon. Bukas na yung The Supreme National Council, guys. Sobrang haba kasi nung binasa nating, yung paragraph, the independence missions. Okay, bye everyone. God bless.